I let two men in fake police uniforms put handcuffs on me. On my own porch. While my HOA president stood on the sidewalk with his arms crossed, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. They told me I was being detained for violating community bylaws. I didn't resist. I didn't argue. I just stood there and let it happen. What they didn't know, what he didn't bother to check, was that I'm the chief of police for this county. And the moment those cuffs clicked shut, he committed a felony. On camera. In front of witnesses. With my officers already on their way. That decision cost him his freedom, his reputation, and his house. But none of that started the day he sent fake cops to my door. It started 3 months earlier, with a fence. Before we jump into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever had a crazy HOA moment, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. The fence wasn't even my idea. My wife wanted privacy in the backyard. Something simple. 6 feet tall, cedar panels, nothing fancy. We'd lived in Maplewood Heights for 4 years by then. Quiet suburb, older homes, the kind of neighborhood where people wave but don't really talk. I liked it that way. My job requires enough conversation. I pulled the property survey we'd gotten when we bought the house. The back boundary line was clear. 20 feet from the rear of our lot to the edge of the community greenbelt. I marked it, measured twice, hired a contractor. The fence went up on a Saturday. Took 6 hours. It looked good. Monday morning, there was an envelope taped to my front door. No stamp. No return address. Just my name handwritten across the front in blue ink. Inside was a single-page letter on Maplewood Heights HOA letterhead. It said my fence was in violation of Section 4.7 of the community bylaws and needed to be removed within 14 days or I'd face daily fines starting at $50. I read it twice. I didn't remember signing anything about fences when we bought the house. I pulled out the closing documents that night. There was a mention of HOA dues, $40 a month, automatically drafted. But nothing about architectural approval. Nothing about restrictions. I figured it was a misunderstanding. That's what I told myself. The next day, I called the number on the letter. A woman answered, pleasant enough, and connected me to the HOA president. His name was Derek Pullman. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, "You put up a fence." I explained the situation. Told him I'd checked the survey, stayed within my property lines, followed local building codes. He cut me off. Doesn't matter. All exterior modifications require board approval. You didn't submit an application. I asked where that rule was written. He said it was in the bylaws. I told him I'd never received a copy. He said that wasn't his problem. Then he told me the fence was also too tall and the wrong color. I asked what the right color was. He said, not dark brown. The call lasted 4 minutes. I'm used to dealing with people who think rules don't apply to them. It's part of the job. But this felt different. This wasn't someone breaking the law. This was someone making up rules as he went and expecting me to comply. I requested a copy of the HOA bylaws in writing. It took them 9 days to respond. When the email finally came, it included a 40-page PDF dated 6 months prior. I opened it, skimmed through, found Section 4.7. It said exterior modifications required board approval. But there was a list of exemptions. Fences under 6 feet on the rear property line were pre-approved as long as they matched community aesthetic standards. Mine was exactly 6 feet. And there was no definition anywhere in the document for what community aesthetic standards meant. I wrote back. Polite. Professional. Cited the exemption, attached photos of my fence, asked for clarification on the aesthetic standards. Derek responded in 2 sentences. Your fence does not meet standards. Remove it or face fines starting March 15th. That was it. No clarification. No appeal process. No explanation. I didn't remove the fence. March 15th came. That afternoon, another letter. This time it wasn't taped to my door. It was wedged into the door frame hard enough to bend the corner. Inside was a citation. $50 fine. Another notice that the fine would increase to $75 per day if the fence remained after March 22nd. I'd dealt with plenty of power-drunk people in my career. Small-time bullies who thought a title gave them authority. Derek Pullman fit the profile. But I wasn't going to escalate. Not yet. I decided to go to the next HOA board meeting. That's where I met him face to face. And that's when I realized this wasn't about a fence at all. The HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse on a Thursday night. 15 people showed up. Most of them were over 60. Derek sat at the front table with 2 other board members, a woman named Patricia who looked like she'd never smiled in her life, and a younger guy named Todd who spent the entire meeting staring at his phone. I waited through 20 minutes of budget discussions and complaints about dog waste before Derek opened the floor for new business. I stood up, introduced myself, explained the fence situation calmly, said I'd followed the bylaws as written and asked for the citation to be removed. Derek didn't even look at me. He said the board had reviewed my case and denied my appeal. Then he moved on to the next topic. I stayed standing. Asked what appeal he was referring to. I'd never filed one. He said my email counted as an appeal. I told him the bylaws required a formal hearing for disputes over $100. He said that only applied to architectural denials, not violations. Patricia leaned into her microphone. Your fence is unapproved and non-compliant. The decision is final. I sat down. I didn't argue. There were witnesses now. And I'd recorded the whole exchange on my phone. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, I came home to find an orange sticker on my front door. It said, "Final notice" in all caps. The fine had jumped to $150. And there was a new charge, $75 for failure to attend mandatory compliance meeting. A meeting I was never told about. I checked my email. Nothing. Checked my mail. Nothing. I called the HOA office. No answer. Left a message. No callback. The fines were adding up faster than I could track them. I went back to the bylaws. Read them cover to cover this time. Found something interesting. The HOA board had the authority to issue fines, but only after written notice and a 10-day cure period. They'd given me 14 days initially. That was fine. But this new $75 charge had no notice. No cure period. It just appeared. I documented everything. Printed the bylaws. Printed the notices. Started a file. My wife asked me why I didn't just take the fence down. It would have been easier. Cheaper. I told her it wasn't about the fence anymore. She didn't ask again. A week later, I was putting my daughter on the school bus when Derek pulled up in his white Lexus. He rolled down the window. Asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. He said, "Must be tough, all those fines piling up. You're over $400 now, you know." I didn't respond. He leaned out the window a little. "You could make this go away. Just take down the fence and pay what you owe. We'll call it even." I asked him if he was offering me a settlement. He laughed. Said it wasn't a settlement. It was advice. Then he drove off. That conversation felt different. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was personal. I started asking around the neighborhood. Turns out, I wasn't the first person Derek had gone after. A guy 3 streets over had been fined for parking his work truck in his driveway. Another family got cited for hanging Christmas lights past January 10th. One couple had been fined $600 for repainting their shutters without approval, even though the new color was identical to the old one. Nobody fought back. They all just paid. I wasn't going to pay. March turned into April. The fines kept coming. They started arriving twice a week. Some were duplicates. Some were for violations I'd never heard of: unkempt landscaping, unapproved mailbox placement, excessive noise. All vague. All unverifiable. All expensive. By mid-April, the total was over $1,200. That's when the first legal letter arrived. Not from the HOA, from a law firm in the city. It said I was in breach of the community covenants and that the HOA was prepared to place a lien on my property if the balance wasn't paid within 30 days. A lien on my house. For a fence. I called the law firm. Got a paralegal who sounded bored. She said this was standard collections procedure. I asked if they'd verified the charges. She said that wasn't their job. They represented the HOA. If I had a dispute, I needed to take it up with the board. I'd already tried that. I contacted a real estate attorney that weekend. Explained the situation. She reviewed the bylaws, the notices, the fine schedule. Took her 2 days. When she called back, she said I had a case. The fines were excessive, procedurally improper, and possibly fraudulent. But fighting it would cost $5,000 minimum. Maybe more. I thanked her. Hung up. Sat in my kitchen and stared at the fence through the window. $1,200 in fines. $5,000 in legal fees. Or just take it down and walk away. Most people would have walked away. I'm not most people. That's when Derek made his first real mistake. He sent 2 men to my house on a Tuesday morning. Both of them wore dark pants, white shirts, and badges clipped to their belts. They knocked on my door. Told me they were community enforcement officers. Said they had authority to inspect my property for code violations. I asked to see their credentials. They showed me laminated cards. Maplewood Heights Community Patrol. I asked if they were law enforcement. One of them said, "We have the same authority within the community." That was a lie. And I knew exactly what Derek was trying to do. He was escalating. Testing me. Seeing how far he could push before I broke. But he didn't know who he was pushing. I told them I didn't consent to a search. They said it wasn't a search, it was an inspection. I told them to leave. They didn't move. That's when I stepped outside. Closed the door behind me. Looked both of them in the eye. And I asked them a very simple question. Are you telling me you're acting as law enforcement officers? The taller one hesitated. Then said, "We're enforcement officers for the HOA. I nodded. Pulled out my phone. Took a picture of both their faces. They left 30 seconds later. And that's when I knew Derek wasn't just arrogant. He was reckless. I didn't call Derek. I didn't send an email. I did something better. I filed a police report. Not as a homeowner. As a private citizen who'd been threatened by individuals impersonating law enforcement officers. I walked into my own station the next morning, sat down with one of my sergeants, and laid it all out. The fake badges. The intimidation. The claim of authority they didn't have. He looked at the photo I'd taken. Ran the names through our system. Neither of them had any credentials. No security license. No post certification. They were landscapers Derek had hired off a contractor list and given fake badges to. That's a felony in our state. Impersonating an officer. Doesn't matter if you're pretending to be a cop or a federal agent or a community enforcement officer. If you wear a badge and claim authority you don't have, you've committed a crime. I told my sergeant to open an investigation. Quiet. No alerts. No warrants yet. Just gather evidence. He nodded. And he smiled. Because by then, half the department knew what Derek had been doing to me. They were waiting for this. I didn't hear from Derek for 3 days. Then, on Friday afternoon, I got a text from a neighbor. She said there were 2 police cars parked outside Derek's house. Not my officers. County sheriff. Turns out, one of the men Derek hired got nervous and called a lawyer. The lawyer told him he was looking at criminal charges and advised him to cooperate. He gave up Derek in under an hour. Handed over the fake badges, the contract, the email where Derek explicitly told him to make it look official. The second guy lawyered up and did the same thing by Monday. Derek was charged with 2 counts of criminal impersonation and 1 count of intimidation. The DA added a fraud charge for the fake inspection notice he'd sent with the fake officers. His bail was set at $10,000. But that's not what broke him. Once the charges went public, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but 3 people recorded it and sent me the audio. Patricia tried to distance herself. Said she had no idea Derek had hired fake officers. Todd claimed he was barely involved in HOA operations. Both of them voted to remove Derek as president effective immediately. But the damage was done. 2 homeowners filed complaints with the county. One hired a lawyer and threatened a class action suit for harassment and illegal fines. Another family contacted a local news station. By Wednesday, there was a reporter standing in front of the Maplewood Heights sign doing a live segment on HOA abuse and fake police. The HOA's insurance company got involved. sent a letter to the board saying they were suspending coverage pending an internal investigation. Without insurance, the HOA couldn't operate, couldn't enforce rules, couldn't collect fines. Everything stopped. And the fines I'd been charged? All of them, mine and everyone else's, were voided by the county after an audit found over 40 violations of state HOA statutes. Improper notices. No hearing process. Fines that exceeded legal limits. The board was forced to refund over $18,000 to residents. Derek's lawyer tried to argue that he was just enforcing community standards, that he didn't know the men he hired weren't real officers, that it was all a misunderstanding. The prosecutor had the emails, the contracts, the photos, and a dozen witnesses who'd been harassed, fined, or threatened over the past 2 years. Derek pled no contest to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, suspended, with 2 years probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution to every homeowner he'd illegally fined. And he was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. His house went up for sale 3 weeks later. But the story didn't end there. Because while the criminal case was moving forward, I did something else. I filed a civil lawsuit. Not for the fines. Not for the harassment. For something much worse. Defamation. Emotional distress. And abuse of process. See, Derek had been telling people in the neighborhood that I was a problem resident. That I didn't respect the community. That I thought I was above the rules because of my job. He'd said it at HOA meetings. Posted it in the community Facebook group. Even told a reporter, off the record, that I was using my position to intimidate him. That last part was documented. My attorney subpoenaed the reporter's notes. Got the Facebook posts. Pulled the meeting recordings. Built a case that Derek had knowingly made false statements to damage my reputation. And here's the thing about defamation. When you're a public figure, it's almost impossible to prove. But I'm not a public figure. I'm a public employee. And Derek wasn't giving an opinion. He was stating facts that weren't true. The case settled out of court. The terms are confidential. But I'll say this, it was enough to cover every dollar I'd spent on legal fees and then some. Derek's attorney called me directly to ask if I'd agree to a gag order as part of the settlement. I declined. Because I wanted people to know what happened. I wanted every HOA president in the county to hear this story and think twice before they decided to play God with someone's property. And I wanted Derek to know that the person he tried to intimidate, the person he sent fake cops to arrest, the person he thought would just roll over and pay, was the one person in the neighborhood who actually had the authority to put him in handcuffs. For real. The fence is still standing. I thought about taking it down after everything settled. My wife suggested it. Said maybe it would help us move on. But I didn't. Because it was never about the fence. And leaving it up felt like the right kind of reminder. Derek moved out of Maplewood Heights 6 weeks after his sentencing. I heard he relocated 2 counties over. No forwarding address. No goodbye. Just gone. His house sold under market value to a family with 3 kids who put up a trampoline in the backyard without asking anyone's permission. Nobody said a word. Patricia and Todd both resigned from the board within a month. The HOA held an election. 3 new members were voted in, people who'd been fined, harassed, or ignored under the old regime. The first thing they did was rewrite the bylaws. Added transparency requirements. Appeal processes. Limits on fines. Everything the old board had avoided for years. They asked me if I wanted to serve on the new board. I declined. Politely. I'd had enough of HOA politics for one lifetime. But the impact didn't stop at Maplewood Heights. The local news segment got picked up by a regional outlet, then a state one. Suddenly, people across the county were talking about HOA overreach. Other neighborhoods started reviewing their own bylaws. Some homeowners discovered they'd been fined illegally for years and had no idea they could fight back. 3 more lawsuits were filed against HOAs in surrounding areas within 2 months. All of them cited the Maplewood case. 2 settled. 1 went to court and resulted in the entire board being removed and replaced by a court-appointed mediator. The state legislature even took notice. A bill was introduced that would require all HOAs to provide free access to bylaws, mandatory dispute resolution, and caps on fines for minor violations. It passed the House, stalled in the Senate. But the conversation had started. And it started because one person decided a fence was worth fighting for. Not me. The guy 3 streets over with the work truck. He was the first one to file a complaint after Derek was charged. He told a reporter that if a police chief could be targeted, what chance did the rest of them have? That quote made it into every version of the story. He was right. I went back to work like nothing had happened. Most of my officers knew the full story. A few of them made jokes. One of the younger guys asked if I wanted him to write Derek a ticket for an expired registration just to twist the knife. I told him no. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. Derek had power. Not much, just enough to make people's lives difficult. And he used it the way small people always do. He punished anyone who didn't fall in line. He made up rules to justify his behavior. And he surrounded himself with people who were too afraid or too compliant to stop him. That's how abuse works. It doesn't start with violence or threats. It starts with a fence, a fine, a rule that doesn't make sense. And it grows because no one pushes back. I pushed back. Not because I'm a police chief. Not because I had resources or connections. I pushed back because I knew what he was doing was wrong. And I had the stubbornness to see it through. Most people don't. And I understand why. Fighting costs time, money, energy, emotional bandwidth. It's easier to pay the fine, take down the fence, move on. But every time someone does that, people like Derek win. And they keep winning until someone makes them stop. I still live in Maplewood Heights. My daughter still catches the bus at the end of the driveway. My wife still wanted that privacy fence, and now she has it. The neighborhood is quieter now. Not quieter in the sense of less noise, quieter in the sense that people seem less tense, less afraid. A few neighbors have thanked me. Others avoid eye contact. I don't take it personally. Some people don't like conflict, even when it benefits them. But the kids play in the street more now. People park their work trucks in their driveways. One house put up a bright blue mailbox. Another painted their shutters purple. Nobody's gotten fined. And that feels like a victory in itself. A few months ago, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, picking through apples. I almost walked past her, but she saw me, nodded. I nodded back. She didn't apologize. I didn't expect her to. But as I was leaving, she stopped me. Said she was glad the new board was working out. That things were better now. I told her they were. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think Derek knew that you were the police chief?" I finished. She nodded. I thought about it, honestly thought about it. And I said, "I think he knew. I think he just didn't care." She didn't respond. Just picked up another apple and walked away. That conversation stuck with me, because it made me realize something. Derek didn't target me because he didn't know who I was. He targeted me because he thought it didn't matter. He thought his little piece of power, his board seat, his bylaws, his fake officers, meant more than the law, more than the truth. He was wrong. And when 2 real officers showed up at his door and put real handcuffs on him, he learned exactly how wrong he was. If you're living in an HOA right now, pay attention to the rules. Read the bylaws. Know your rights. And if someone in a position of power starts making threats, fining you without cause, or sending people to your door with fake badges, don't just comply. Document everything. Ask questions. Push back. Because people like Derek only have as much power as you give them. And sometimes, the person they're trying to intimidate is the last person they should have messed with. I let 2 men put handcuffs on me that day. But I was never the one in trouble.